some liberals annoy me more than others. It's a very obvious statement. But I mean some type of, certain types of liberals, not just individuals, but people fall into a particular genre. And very high on my list these days are pastors, men of the cloth, people within the Christian faith tradition, also known, I guess, just as Christians, who try to come up with ways to say that the party, the real Christians in America today are Democrats, and really actually leftists, not even just Democrats. That the far left of the political spectrum is more in line with Christianity, which I have to tell you is a pretty brazen, crazy thing to say, but it is said. I was sitting actually today, and some of you might have noticed I got a haircut, so I feel like a shorn sheep, or perhaps a shorn llama. I don't know if which one is more accurate, but it was like they had taken a weed whacker to a yak. I had let the buck hair get a little too long, but I was sitting there in the barber chair, and MSNBC was on, and I'm somebody who occasionally, I like to take a peek behind enemy lines and see, all right, well, what is the other side saying? What is their approach here? What is their position? And they had on this guy who I've heard of him before. I actually don't think I'd seen him on TV before, but I've heard of his work. This Pastor Jim Wallace, who went on to just say all the things that I know my liberal atheists, I wouldn't say friends, liberal atheist colleagues that I've had in the past love this stuff. They love the members of the evangelical community who'll come forward and be like, well, the real person to support if you're a believing Christian is, Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, because Jesus was a Marxist, and taking care of the poor is what Democrats do, and all these sweeping statements that are not fair, that are not true, and they leave out a whole other bunch of stuff, like Democrats are the party of infanticide, of transgender hormone therapy for 7-year-olds, for just for locking people up for saying things that are not popular or not acceptable or whatever the case may be, and not politically correct. The Democrats don't believe in any one universal morality, generally speaking. They're much more likely, I know this is a broad statement, much more likely to be moral relativists. Yeah, you do your thing, I do my thing. There's no universal truth. It's kind of a strange thing to say if you believe in God, Jesus, and the Bible, but nonetheless, here was Pastor Jim Wallace. I wanted Producer Mark to pull this just so you could hear it. He's got a book out, Christ in Crisis. I shouldn't have said the title. Don't buy it. Here's 25.
I've had these conversations with fairly prominent white evangelicals, and I've pushed them. And I said, what's the limiting principle for you? What exactly would Donald Trump have to do to forfeit your vote? Not even to earn the vote of a Democrat. And the answer that I get is none. That is that they're so seized with fear, that many of them, not all evangelicals, but many of them, so seized with fear and a sense that this is an existential moment, that they believe that they have to defend Trump no matter what he does, because they think darkness will descend upon the land if he loses. That's the mindset that we're dealing with.
Okay, but then doesn't that get us somewhere, Jim, around the worshiping of false idols?
Well, Pete is right. I mean, here's a radical idea. Our faith should shape our politics, not the other way around. So some of these religious right, evangelical white elite leaders, they've made a Faustian bargain, as Pete's been describing here, a Faustian bargain with Donald Trump. You give us these things we want, and we'll ignore everything you say and do. So the body of Christ around the world, the church, is the most diverse human community on the planet. But here it is idols, Stephanie. You're right. It is the idols of whiteness and the whole, our neighbor is our enemy. No, Jesus said, love your neighbor. So there's an idolatry here, and you're right on it. That's what we have to deal with. This is about our relationship to God.
There's a relationship to God here. It says, there's idolatry and there's
love your neighbor. That means your neighbor, can make your child, have gender transition surgery, and if you want to have an abortion for a baby that's 8 months in the womb, and if you think that Christians are all bigots and that traditional marriage is bigoted and terrible, this is. I just want to know where do they find this guy? That was the second one you heard from there is Jim Walsh. Sure, there's got to be nice to the neighbors, and really, the white nationalism right now. So basically, I'm going to pretend to be a man of the cloth, but I'm really going to be up here just saying all kinds of social justice, left-wing woke stuff. But, the leftists will love it because even though they actually generally hate Christianity and the church, they hate traditional morality. I'm somebody from technically that team of Christianity, and I'm saying all the things that the HuffPost comment section would want to say. Where do they find this guy? Amazing. He's an author. He's getting put on TV. I remember I had an evangelical author who showed up at the Hill. I don't even know if we ever aired the interview. It got a little bit contentious. And, he was all, well, I think if you're a real believing evangelical, you have to be a Democrat. First of all, I'm sorry, where does it say in the Bible that people can show up and have an expectation that the government would take from me to give to them, even if they are violating the laws of that government? Because when we're talking about illegal immigration, that's what we're talking about. So people who are showing up here illegally in America, it's not just they're violating state sovereignty. They show up with the expectation that the government will take my property, my time, the essence of my work, and all of you listening too, and give it to those people in violation of law. And if you're not okay with that, if you say, I'm not going to pay my taxes anymore because you're letting in millions and millions of illegal aliens and not doing anything about it, you go to prison. Is that biblical? I just want to know, where's the render under Caesar's part of this? But we don't even have to get into that. I just thought it was so interesting when I spoke to this evangelical author. I don't remember the guy's name, and his book was crap and his arguments were garbage. But his point was that, well, climate change, if you're a real Christian, you have to be a good steward of the environment. It's like, so now we're just going to say, agree with me in a very contentious scientific political debate, or else you're not a good Christian. This is the position. I mean, the leftists love to do this. I think they know that it's just intellectually laughable, but they'll do this anyway. And yet, you come across this. The other point that I don't know who the first guy was before Jim Wallace, before he's sitting there saying, yeah, you got to do all the things for the illegals, or else you're a bad Christian. You're going to burn in hell. The first guy who spoke there saying that there's a Faustian bargain made, or that and also Stephanie Rule worship false idols. I mean, I wonder how many books of the Bible Stephanie Rule could cite off the top of her head. That would be a fun question. It'd be a fun one to ask. Yeah, it's just like they're like worshiping the false idols, like totally, like there's like that big like the golden like moose or whatever that they were all like, oh, it's the golden moose, like we're all dancing around it. Stephanie Rule, I don't think she knows a lot about the Bible, but there we are, and we're being told that evangelicals, Christians in this country, have done something terrible because they support President Trump, who clearly has a checkered past, clearly has a background that does not line up with somebody living Christian values and virtues necessarily. But we also all accept that we're imperfect. And we also understand that we are in an era where the ability to live your Christian faith as any American is increasingly under assault. Just ask the guy who didn't want to bake a cake that was celebrating not just a gay wedding, by the way, but, Satan and putting genitalia on the cake and all kinds of stuff they did to Masterpiece Cake Shop. I mean, Christianity is under assault from the left. You had, Beto O'Rourke just recently say that if a church doesn't support LGBTQ agenda, then it should lose its tax-exempt status. So in that circumstance, remember, people are voting for a politician. They're not voting for the Pope or their chief bishop or whatever the equivalent would be in other. I mean, I grew up Catholic. I don't know what it is if an evangelical, what the top evangelical leader would be called. But people are voting for a politician that has the power to enforce or not enforce laws, to sign bills or not sign bills, to veto things. I mean, this is the decision that is being made, and to trash people for making a decision that they think has at least a champion for their freedom to live their faith in their lives is deeply disingenuous and unfair and gross. But Democrats, I give Ann Coulter credit years ago, and she wrote about godless. I mean, the Democratic Party is overrun with not just, look, if people want to be atheists, that's fine. Militant atheists, people that want to run all traditional religion out of the public square, have no response, have no real idea as to what should replace it. They just want to eradicate it. No one else can have it. No one else can enjoy that or have that faith be a part of their lives. And yet somehow, I mean, a lot of Catholics vote Democrat. Catholics will vote for the infanticide party. I don't understand that one, but it happens nonetheless. It's just something that I see now. There's an effort to really rub evangelical, in particular, it's evangelicals, their noses in support for Trump as some kind of hypocrisy, when they've made a determination, and it's a sound one, that their choices are, the party of eradication of religion from the public square, of paying lip service to religious freedom when social justice and wokeness and multiculturalism is always going to be elevated above religious freedom in the eyes of when the left is in charge. And traditional Christians have made this determination that they'd rather have somebody who at least fights for their right to be who they are and worship as they see fit. And now they're being bashed for it by people like this guy, Jim Wallace. I mean, I don't MSNBC, I know they put a lot of loons on TV on a regular basis, but this guy, I was sitting in my chair getting my hair cut, and I was just thinking I wasn't even planning on talking this today, but saw him there. Yeah, you just have to Jesus just gave all of his possessions away, so, for the Green New Deal, why don't we just give all of our stuff away so we can get rid of all the carbon in the air? And if you don't do that, God doesn't love you, and I'm a man of the cloth, and I'm here to tell you all. It was, this guy really, really rubbed me the wrong way, obviously. So, if you're going to be a priest, at least be a nice priest. You don't have to be a great orator. You don't have to be an icon of virtue in the face of all of your detractors and all that stuff. But don't be a mean priest. This guy's kind of mean.
It's not just the donors who are concerned. You have two front runners who are both extremely flawed and extremely vulnerable. Joe Biden has seemed very rickety on that debate stage. He's not raising money the way he should. He's spending too much money, doesn't have cash reserves. And Elizabeth Warren is to the left of a lot of Democratic voters and a lot of general election voters. So I think the panic here is real. What's sort of silly is the notion that there's someone out there in the forest who's going to solve all of the problems.
Democrats in a panic. A growing panic as this election gets closer, and they realize this group of candidates they put forward, not impressive, not likely to get it done, not likely to be able to make this happen. Joe Biden as frontrunner, I've said all along, that is your frontrunner? That's who you think is going to win this election? A guy who they've had to adjust his schedule because he seems too tired and makes too many gaffes at the end of the day? Someone who wasn't, until Obama just essentially pulled him up out of nowhere. Well, he was a senator from Delaware, but no offense, Delaware, and decided that he was going to be not the heir apparent. Remember that. Obama did not hand the baton, so to speak, to Biden. It went to Hillary. But now that's the best they can do? Elizabeth Warren, the more you look at her policies, she has this persona of, well, I just want to do the best I can. And, my daddy always told me that if you get too close to a porcupine and a hippopotamus and you roll them together, you got a shrimp salad. It's like, what? Doesn't make any sense, but who cares? She just has this affect of, I'm from the Midwest, and I didn't figure out that I was actually just a white lady until I was in my 60s, but you can trust me with the entire U.S. economy. The more you look at her policies, as we started to yesterday, it's radical stuff. Radical stuff. Now you could say, oh, but the Senate, the House, they won't go along with all this necessarily, so there'll be some kind of break on the crazy. But why do we want to put somebody in office where we need to have a break on the crazy? Wouldn't it be better to have somebody who knows what the heck they're doing and understands how to actually grow an economy? And I don't know. I mean, you can call me crazy, but I think that's probably a better idea for all of us, for all involved. But these Democrats are not going to be sufficient, even in the eyes of a lot of Democrats, to defeat President Trump, which is why you're seeing the desperation of this impeachment inquiry, which is clearly unfair, which does not have any guardrails put on it, doesn't have anything that even begins to look like a free and fair, well, I should say free and fair election, a fair process. Forget about whether it's free. Because they're looking to have some kind of X factor. They need to stack the deck. They need to hide a card. I was going to say a Trump card. Whoops. They need to hide a card up their sleeves. Something to even the odds a little bit. Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and all these other Democrats, these people are not inspiring. And what do they really represent? What do they even stand for? They're going to try to go back toward the center because voters who are the undecideds in the key states care most about the economy. They care about health care. The Medicare for All plan is not going to withstand scrutiny. People are going to figure out in time that this is just, not only is it not going to work as advertised, it would be a disaster if they roll this thing out the way that they plan to, the way they say they will. And once that happens, well, then what do they really offer? What's really the value proposition of voting for any of these Democrats? They don't know. Why vote for Joe Biden? Oh, it's going to be a return to civility? He keeps saying he's going to beat Trump like a drum, for one thing, which I'm going to beat Trump like a drum, he says. I don't know where he got that phrase, but he's not helping his out-of-touch, grumpy old man syndrome at all with that stuff. The good news for him is that Bernie Sanders is in there, who seems even grumpier and older. So at least Joe Biden, by comparison, isn't quite as out of the age realm of what you would think would be able to run for president of the United States. But I'm starting to see this. Democrats are really looking for something, really hoping that something comes up. And that's where you're getting this stuff about not just Hillary, but maybe Bloomberg or maybe Oprah, or I've seen Michelle Obama. They're hoping she might get into the race. This is desperation time for Democrats, and we haven't even gotten through the primary yet. What does that tell you about whether they're ready to lead or not?
We as American people, we do a lot of business in China, and they know and understand our values, and we understand their values. And one of our best values here in America is free speech. We're allowed to say what we want to say, and we're allowed to speak up about injustices, and that's just how it goes. And if people don't understand that, that's something that they have to deal with. But, I just thought it was unfortunate for, both parties, and then you got people speaking when they don't know what they're talking about. But Daryl Morey was right. Whenever you see something wrong going on anywhere in the world, you should have the right to say that's not right, and that's what he did. But again, when it comes to business, sometimes you have to tiptoe around things. But again, they understand our values. We understand our values, and here we have the right to speak, especially with the social media. We're going to say whatever we want to say when we want to say it.
Yeah, Shaq. Yeah. Was that so hard, by the way? I mean, I think Shaq did a very good job of making the point there, but he's a major public figure, now he's a sports commentator, but he was the most, I think you could argue in his day, probably the most dominant. I used to watch a lot of NBA stuff. I think he was, in his heyday, the most dominant player in the NBA, in the history of the NBA. Nobody was able to dominate a game the way Shaq. Even LeBron James couldn't dominate a game the way Shaquille O'Neal could.
Yeah, you can make the argument he's the most dominant center of all time.
Definitely the most dominant center of all time.
Yeah.
But I think you'd argue he's the most dominant.
Michael Jordan.
Whoa.
Come
okay,
on.
maybe. dominant, though? Jordan was amazing, but it wasn't like you put him in the game and you're just inherently going to win the game necessarily. Shaq, you just dump it to him in the paint, and he was just dunk on everybody.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Jordan had to work for his points. Shaq was just like, I will crush you, and just jumped and dunked it and everything else. Anyway, back to the free speech point here, because I've been a little bit troubled today by how much free speech is, in fact, under assault, and how, this is the case we were talking about at University of Connecticut. That's like out of a textbook of what should be considered, a free speech issue, where everybody should know that, yeah, the free speech here means that you're allowed to say the bad thing and not face government consequences. I mean, maybe face institutional consequences, get expelled or whatever, but not from the government. I mentioned the NBA situation. Now, that's a little bit more complicated because you're not getting in trouble with the government. That is a response. That's a response to economic pressure from an outside, a foreign government entity. But Shaq is willing to say, look, we got our values, they got their values. One of our values is we say what's on our minds. That's how we do things here. Daryl Morey was right. LeBron James should have said that. LeBron James could have said that, or he could have said nothing. I'm always a big believer in people that, if someone wants to stay in their lane and not be public about their politics, I would prefer we live in a country where you're allowed to do that. Then everyone is forced to, if they're big enough, if they're important enough, have the kind of platform where they can really affect the discussion, they feel the obligation to speak out about something. But good for Shaq on this point here. I mean, what he says is absolutely true. What he says is absolutely the case, that we understand their values, they understand our values. I think the Chinese increasingly are challenging our values. And as I've been mentioning to you, the people I know who watch that country very closely, understand it well, understand the culture, speak the language, it is becoming more aggressive toward the United States. It is becoming more aggressive toward our people, not just as a general policy matter. And that's something that's going to have long-term implications. In the meantime, though, at least a willingness from the super powerful and wealthy in our society to say that we are not going to abandon free speech, that's encouraging. And I give Shaq credit. I'll also say that that show that Shaquille does with Charles Barkley and I think the guy named Ernie on TNT is actually pretty funny. That's a pretty good commentary. I used to watch that, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Johnson.
Ernie Johnson, is that right? Yeah. That's a good show.
Yeah, everyone says that's actually the best sports pregame, halftime, postgame show in all of sports, actually.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that. Yeah, I would believe it, because even I like it, and I'm not that into sports, or at least watching professional sports. I should probably start watching more professional sports so I can relate to all of America, because they're all watching professional sports all the time. But
yeah, if you want to say you're a big American, you have to watch
I gotta
sports.
be American. Well, I mean, don't even get me started on baseball.
Oh, what's wrong with baseball?
Do you like baseball too?
I love baseball.
Oh my God, you like hockey and baseball? I can't even. I'm stuck in a room with this guy all day. This is absolutely madness. I mean, baseball is great if you want to sit in one place for 7 hours and have three or four moments of excitement.
You have to appreciate the sport. It's like a long chess match.
I gotta learn. I'd rather watch a chess match, actually. I'd rather
you're
be
just wrong.
in Washington Square Park, speed chess, slow chess. I don't care what kind of chess. More exciting than watching baseball. I'm always amazed.
Is it because hats don't fit your head? Is that it?
All right, you got to go there.
Yep.
Also helmets. It's really the helmets that
So then all sports other than the NBA are out.
The helmets squeeze the massive cranium. No, I like football. I like the NFL because I'm an American.
Oh.
So that's the real sport.
Remember last week when I asked you to name a giant?
Did I name one?
You named Eli Manning.
Yeah, I did.
Who
Boom.
is not their starting quarterback.
Victory. That's all we really. Who is the starting quarterback now?
Daniel Jones.
Who is that?
They just drafted him.
Might as well make Buck Sexton the starting quarterback. No one knows who this guy is.
A lot of people do, not Buck Sexton.
Oh, whatever. See, this is why producer Mark is here. So make sure that I know the things that everybody in the country knows except for me, apparently, like who's the starting quarterback in the Jets. I haven't watched an NFL game yet this season. You know why? I've been too busy doing research for this show.
Yeah, you email me all day on Sunday, and I'm like, what is Buck doing?
Correct.
Get a life.
Just doing research for this show. This is all I do all day, all night. The Buck Sexton Show.
It's time for roll call.
Yes, it is. It is time for the roll call, which is a fantastic time for all involved. Let us get to it, shall we? Start the noise here. TJ, we'll do the Facebook today. TJ writes, and remember, facebook.com/Buck Sexton if you want to get in on this roll call action. What do you think about Edward Snowden's appearance on Joe Rogan last night, if you haven't already opined it on your show? TJ, I'm sorry to say that the first I've heard about it is from you right now. I didn't know that Edward Snowden appeared on Joe Rogan's show, so I can't really have an informed opinion on it. And so I suppose I should check this out. This Snowden issue is can be a bit complicated sometimes. Depends on what aspect of it we're discussing. Same with talking about Julian Assange, although I do think he is people talk about a Russian asset. I think Julian Assange is an asset of the Russians. Elena asks me a personal question that I'll defer for right now on. Benjamin, Buck, thanks for letting us know about your Nashville visit. My wife and I have our tickets to Politicon and are bringing the kids. As a lifelong Rush baby, I first heard you when you filled in for Rush. I noticed you were using doctrinal terms when talking about national security and made the switch to listening to you in 2015. The Buck Brief is the best open source intel out there, and your Syria analysis and commentary on the Kurds is spot on. Thanks for all you do every day. I hope my kids grow up as Buck babies. Look forward to seeing you in person this weekend. Sancticomi, not so much. Ben. Ben, thank you so much for the kind words, man. Yes, I will be at Politicon in Nashville this weekend, and I'm excited to tell you that, I'm pleased to tell you, I've never been to Nashville before. In fact, I've never been to Tennessee before. It's going to be my first time. I'm 37 years young, and I haven't been to Nashville. So this is my first go in Nashville, which is going to be quite a thing. I do keep saying I'm going to get down to Austin. I was just talking to my brother about it this week. That is very high on my list. I do think I'll get to Austin hopefully very soon, especially my folks down in KLBJ Austin. We will be hanging out. It will happen. Erica, about the 7-year-old boy in Texas or any other youth going through gender transition, adults need to wait until that child experiences all the aspects of being an adult man or woman before any hormone therapy or surgery. This boy is yet to experience some aspects of his sexuality. He hasn't. There's a pretty serious loss to his future. All right, Erica. Well, thank you so much, and I agree with you that you shouldn't be able to gender transition until you're at least an adult, because the hormonal processes that are going on, especially in adolescence and through teenage years, to mess with that, I just think it will have dire consequences, long-term health consequences for any individual. And beyond that, how can you really make an informed decision about that? How can you make an informed decision without at least knowing and experiencing a bit more of life as an adult? Van comes in and writes, "Hey, Buck, I personally don't think that President Trump picked the wrong word when he intimated that he is the victim of a political lynching. The reason it touched off such a firestorm is because generally the public at large consider the term to describe a racist act, even though there were certainly many whites that fell prey to lynch mobs." Yes, man, I said that. Julian Castro stated that it's beyond shameful to use the word lynching to describe being held accountable for your actions. But I ask you, isn't that exactly what those lynch mobs of old said they were doing? And many times, lynchings were brought against a victim merely because of the way they looked or the way they were perceived without any real evidence. I pray that God will help our country in this a most critical hour. Shields high. Van. Oh, Van, thank you so much for your note, my friend. I think that, well, we now know that Democrats use the term so much that for them to pretend that it is a horrible and heinous crime to speak of a political lynching when Donald Trump does it. No, I'm sorry. We don't get to have certain people can say certain words. I don't approve of that in any context. I think words, it always depends on the intent, the circumstance, and that's how we determine whether or not someone has crossed a line. But not just, you look this way, you look that way, you can say this, you can say that. And certainly based on political persuasion, which we've seen more of that too. As we sit here, and Justin Trudeau is the Prime Minister of Canada once again because he was woke, even though he had all of those incidents of anti-wokeness in his past. It's one way of saying it. Wow. It's crazy. It's crazy that guy's Prime Minister Canada. All right, Rebecca writes, "Hey, Buck, I enjoy watching you on Fox. I read you went to Amherst College. My brother-in-law went there, and I myself am from Western Massachusetts. I live outside of Boston. Do you ever come to Boston?" Well, Rebecca, I have been to Boston a couple of times, and I really do like it very much. It's a great town. I had some fun there. I do not get there very often, though, especially now that we've launched the Pluto stream, channel 248, on Pluto TV here of The First, this new amazing channel that's going to be the best conservative content you can get anywhere. I have to kind of be in place here, and I can't really do quite as much traveling as I used to. So that's all my way of saying, hopefully I'll get up there to Boston and eat some chowder. Drive up there in a car, eat some chowder. I love you, Boston. All you Boston, or is it Bostonites or Boston? It's Bostonians, right? Bostonite. I was way off. Marina writes, OSS here. Original Saturday Squad. I think Biden has such a lead because much of America doesn't pay close attention until after the primary. I think the Dems will help Biden waltz to the finish, but choose who his VP will be, knowing they will either have Biden step down or force him to step down for medical reasons, placing his VP squarely in the top seat. His VP should be our biggest concern. Huh. You think the Dems want Biden to win, but then will have his VP take over? Marina also writes, Jeffrey Epstein completely forgotten. Marina, I think that's mostly true. We have not really gotten to the bottom of the Epstein situation. Some of the stories that I've read about how, he made his money by, doing these investments. No. There was shady stuff going on, but they've made the Epstein story go away. That's real. We're never going to really find out what was truly going on there. And some of the bad stuff we know about, but there was so much more. There had to be so much more. And there's just not enough of an interest, not enough of a hunger in the media to get to the bottom of it. I wonder why, given some of the people that he was associating with. Let's see here. Carrie wrote in about the clips and me talking over them. Sorry, guys, I won't talk over the clips. Let's see. We have Frank writes, 2 things you should know about have returned. Peaky Blinders and the Drudge app. Whoa! The Drudge app is back? That is amazing. I was super bummed when the Drudge. That's a very good heads up. Let me see if I guess I got to download it on my phone. I was so sad when they got rid of the Drudge app. I was told that it was just me and a bunch of old people that were reading it, but I use the Drudge app all the time. So that's back. And Peaky Blinders, I'm waiting to dive into the latest season, hoping to do that maybe, not this weekend, maybe next weekend. But I very much want to do some Peaky Blinders stuff. So, yes, indeed. I want to watch it. I think it's a great show. Producer Mark, you ever watch Peaky Blinders? You ever done it?
I have not.
Or will you give it a go on my say-so? I think you'll be
Maybe.
Maybe?
I don't know. I'm very busy nowadays.
That's true. You're preparing for a wedding. What's the T-minus what for the wedding?
I don't know. It's like 40 days, maybe under 40 days now.
Oh, wow. All right. Good luck, my friend.
Well, thank you.
You're gonna have your hands full and then some. What is your Netflix show of choice these days? Do you have one?
I don't think I have one. I still haven't watched the new Breaking Bad movie, which is annoying me.
I haven't watched that either. I want to get to that.
Yeah, I need to get to it.
I actually I've got like a stack of content that I got to see, but I also have a book to write and books to read and this show to do, and it's hard.
Yeah. And now it's a fall
technically I'm supposed to have a
cycle.
social life too, and like maybe get married and have kids at some point. So we're working on that.
There's a fall TV cycle, so I have to watch all the shows with the fiance.
Yeah. Did you watch anything good?
I watched 911 on Fox. That's really good.
Is it just like another cop show?
A cop, firefighter, ambulance, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, getting the whole first responder
all
family
of that,
and
exactly.
all that action. All right.
I still watch Grey's Anatomy.
She makes you watch that.
Yeah,
though.
I watched it before. I'll admit it.
Really?
I did. Yeah.
It's very sensitive of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you sit there with like a giant glass of red wine and occasionally tear
Just
up a little bit?
a bottle of it.
There we go. That's one way to go. So yeah, I will have to watch the latest Peaky Blinders and see what I think about that. So I'll give you my review of it, of course. By the way, the Joker looks like it's going to make I think it's made $900 million globally. They think it'll be the biggest R-rated movie of all time, bigger even than Deadpool.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I love Deadpool.
I thought the first Deadpool was very funny.
Yeah.
Very
You didn't
well
like the
done.
second one?
Nah, not as much.
It wasn't as good, but I
No.
liked it.
That like the weird kid that's like, I scream and everything gets destroyed. That wasn't
Sure.
cool. That wasn't cool. But the first Deadpool was really good. See, we agree on some things.
I'm glad. Those are two superhero movies, too. You actually
I didn't
watched.
say all superhero movies are bad. I just said the Avengers are bad
All
because
right,
they
fine,
are.
Fine, whatever.
Audience agrees with me.
No, they don't.
They agree with me.
Yeah, the fact that it's the highest grossing movie of all time, they don't agree with you.
That's going to be the show for today, team. Talk to you tomorrow. Shields high.